This is you. You were born in a city that forgot it had a bottom. A place so far down the ladder that the people at the top don't even know it exists. A maze of rusted rooftops, cracked concrete, and alleyways that smell like burning plastic and broken promises. Your parents were ghosts long before they actually disappeared. One morning you woke up and they simply weren't there. No note, no goodbye. Just the hollow echo of an empty apartment and a 7-year-old kid standing in the kitchen wondering why the silence felt so permanent. You didn't cry. You didn't know how yet. What you did have, the only inheritance your parents left behind, was a single photograph pinned to the wall above your mattress. Not of your family, not of a place. It was a photo torn from a magazine, a picture of a building in some foreign city, its entire wall covered in a mural so vivid, so alive, that it looked like the concrete itself had learned how to dream. Faces, colors, stories, all bleeding into each other in a chaos so beautiful it made your chest hurt. You stared at that photo every night until it became a religion. Your first canvas was a broken piece of sidewalk chalk and the back wall of an abandoned factory. You were 8. Your hands shook, but the image that came out, a pair of wings spreading wide across the crumbling brick, stopped 3 strangers in their tracks. One of them, an old woman carrying groceries, looked at it for a long time and then looked at you and said nothing. But her eyes said everything. Something in your chest cracked open that day, warm and terrifying all at once. That was the feeling you spent the rest of your life chasing. By the time you were 12, your tags were everywhere. Underpasses, water towers, the backs of shuttered storefronts. You moved through the city at night like smoke, a backpack full of stolen spray cans and a head full of visions that had nowhere else to go. You weren't vandalizing. You were translating. Every wall was a sentence you desperately needed to finish. You got caught, of course, more times than you can count. Chased by security guards, cornered by neighborhood thugs who wanted your cans, slapped around by cops who called it destruction of property. But none of that could touch the feeling, the hiss of the aerosol, the bloom of color against gray concrete, the way a blank wall transformed into something that made people stop and feel something. That was the only thing in your life that made sense, the only thing that told you that you existed. But one night, fate stops being poetic and turns predatory. You're midway through the most ambitious piece you've ever attempted, a full wall on the side of a rail yard, a massive mural of a city burning and blooming at the same time. Fire and flowers intertwined. When the lights hit you, not police lights, worse. 4 black vans rolling slow, no markings, no sirens. Men in dark clothing who move with the practiced silence of people who do this for a living. You run. You're fast. Years of escaping through alleyways has made you half animal. But tonight, the exits are sealed. They've done their homework. Every gap, every shortcut, every rat hole you'd used 100 times before has a body in it. You're herded like livestock into a cul-de-sac, your back pressed against the very wall you'd just been painting. You're still holding your spray can when they take you. You try to fight. You try to reason. You tell them you're nobody, a street kid, a vandal, worthless to anyone with actual money. But one of the men, calm as a surgeon, tells you that's precisely why they chose you. Nobody looks for ghosts. They put a hood over your head. The last thing you see before the darkness is your unfinished mural. The city half burning, half blooming. Caught forever between destruction and creation. You wake up in a place that smells like concrete and old fear. Your head is splitting. There's dried blood on your temple, though you can't remember the blow that caused it. When you reach up to touch it, your hand feels foreign, like it belongs to someone else. You try to remember your name. You try to remember the mural, the rail yard, the vans. There's nothing. A clean white void where your life used to be. The blow scrambled something essential. The doctors, if you could call the men who stitched your head in that basement doctors, would later say it was trauma-induced amnesia, a psychological self-defense mechanism. Your brain, overwhelmed by violence, simply chose to reboot. Around you, in the dim light of a converted warehouse, sit dozens of young men. Different ages, different faces, all wearing the same hollow expression, the look of people who've had their futures surgically removed. Some of them stare at the floor, some stare at nothing. One kid in the corner is shaking so hard his teeth are chattering despite the heat. Then the door opens. He doesn't walk in so much as arrive. A man built like a construction crane, all angles and iron and absolute economy of movement. He fills the doorframe without trying. His face is a topographical map of every bad decision he's ever witnessed, scars that tell stories you don't want to hear. He doesn't introduce himself with a name, just a title, the Architect. His voice is low and even, the kind of voice that doesn't need to rise to command silence. He tells you that your old lives are finished, that from this moment forward, you are raw material, that the black market doesn't trade in drugs or weapons anymore. The most valuable commodity in the modern world is a person who can walk into any room, read every face in it, and make decisions that others can't stomach. He's building an intelligence-based kill network. Not brutes, not soldiers. Ghosts with surgically precise judgment. You will learn to kill. Or you will be killed while learning. A kid near the front. Expensive shoes. Practiced sneer, the body language of a boy. Who's never been told no, stands up and announces that his father is a senator, and that this is a kidnapping and that every single person in this room will spend the rest of their lives in a cage. He speaks with the trembling confidence of someone who has always believed his last name was a shield. The Architect walks to him without hurrying. What happens next lasts approximately 4 seconds. When it's over, the boy is on the floor and the room is a church. The Architect wipes his hand on his jacket and says simply, "Those names are architecture, and architecture can be demolished." The first week nearly kills you, not metaphorically, literally. You run until your vision tunnels. You're deprived of sleep for 60-hour stretches. You're put in stress positions until your mind starts generating hallucinations. You're starved, screamed at, humiliated in front of the group in methodical rotations designed to locate your breaking point and then push past it. But here's what they don't account for. You don't remember having a breaking point. With no past to protect, no identity to defend, no self-image to preserve, there's nothing to break. You absorb the punishment the way a wall absorbs, weather, stoically, endlessly. You come back every time with eyes that see everything and a face that gives nothing away. Others start to notice. On the third day, a stocky kid with quick hands and a nervous laugh slides his extra bread ration across the floor to you in the dark. He introduces himself as Stitch, got the name from sewing his own wounds shut since he was 10 because hospitals asked questions. He has the fastest hands you've ever seen, the kind of speed that looks lazy until something disappears. The second is a girl, one of only 3 women in the facility, who they call Cypher. She's small and angular and speaks in precise, economical sentences, like someone who decided years ago that words were currency and she was conserving everyone. Her superpower is numbers, patterns. She can look at a building's layout once and reconstruct it from memory 3 weeks later. She's the one who maps every camera, every guard rotation, every structural weakness in the facility within the first 48 hours. Just out of habit. The third is a massive, quiet man everyone simply calls the Wall. He doesn't explain the nickname. He doesn't need to. Built like poured concrete, slow to speak, but when he does, the room listens. He has the instinct of someone who has spent his whole life being the thing that stands between other things. And then there's you. With no memory to offer, no name to give, you sit in silence when they go around the group. Stitch squints at you, asks what you're thinking. You tell him honestly, you don't know. He snorts, Says it's like talking to a blank wall. Cypher tilts her head. Says that's not an insult. Says blank walls are the most dangerous thing in any room because they're waiting to become something. From that night on, they call you Canvas. The name fits in ways none of them fully understand yet, because here is what the amnesia gives you that no training ever could. You read people the way you used to read walls. Every face is a surface with layers, what's been painted over, what's been scratched out, what's bleeding through from underneath. You see the micro-expressions that flash before the mask goes up. The way the architect's left eye tightens infinitesimally when he's calculating a punishment versus when he's genuinely angry. The way the guard on the East Wing unconsciously touches his collar when he's lying about ration counts. You don't know your own name, but you can tell within 60 seconds of meeting a person exactly what they're afraid of. In this place, that is the most dangerous weapon in existence. Your crew, 4 walls, 4 people, 1 unbreakable unit, survives together through the logic of collective sacrifice. Stitch steals. Cypher plans. The wall absorbs. You read. Each one covering the gap the others can't. You share everything. Food, information, pain. On a night 2 months in, when the darkness is absolute and the sounds from the punishment block have gone quiet in a way that means someone isn't coming back, Stitch produces a shard of sharpened wire and you each drag it across your palms without ceremony. 4 thin lines of blood in the dark. No speeches. Just a fact, all or none. The architect, to his credit, is not a fool. He recognizes what's being built in Cell 4. He doesn't break it up. Elite units require genuine bonds. Fabricated loyalty collapses under real pressure. He watches you the way a chess player watches a piece he isn't sure how to classify. He gives you harder problems. You solve them. He gives you moral ambiguities. You navigate them. He gives you a target, a man, who has done genuinely terrible things and asks you to assess the optimal method of elimination without being told to actually do it. You spend 4 hours observing the target through binoculars from a rooftop. You come back with a 7-page written analysis, behavioral patterns, psychological profile, optimal approach windows, 3 different methods ranked by risk and forensic trace. You present it without emotion. The architect reads it twice, looks up at you, says nothing for a long time. Then he says, "You have the most dangerous thing a person in this business can have, clarity without cruelty." 6 months later, you graduate into the field, your first real mission is clean and cold and over in under 4 minutes. The target is a mid-level arms broker who skims product from his own supply chain and covers it with creative accounting. He's having lunch alone at a restaurant, which is already a tell. Men in his position who eat alone are either supremely confident or supremely paranoid. You clock him from the entrance and know within seconds, confident. He holds his fork like someone who believes rooms belong to him. Stitch enters first as a delivery courier. Clumsy and apologetic, collides with a waiter near the target's table. Creates a visual chaos that pulls every eye in the room. In that window, 4.3 seconds. Cypher, seated 2 tables away since before the target arrived. Slides a contact transfer compound onto the back of his chair. Odorless, colorless, absorbed through skin contact. Causes cardiac arrhythmia within 20 minutes. Indistinguishable from natural causes in a man of his age and diet. You never enter the building. You sit in a car across the street, watching the restaurant window, reading every face that passes the glass. When the ambulance arrives 22 minutes later, you're already 3 blocks away. No gunshots. No bodies with visible wounds. No evidence of anything except a man who ate too much salt. The architect calls it elegant. You call it geometry. Over the next 2 years, the missions grow in complexity the way a disease grows. Slowly at first, then all at once. You intercept a courier carrying encrypted financial documents, replacing the contents with a subtle forgery that will unravel the target organization's internal trust structure over the next 8 months. You infiltrate a private security summit by reading the behavioral patterns of the real attendees well enough to manufacture perfect social camouflage. You attend as a Swiss logistics consultant, speak to 43 people, and none of them ever suspect. You and the wall remove a protected target from a fortified safe house using nothing but timing, a deliberate power outage, and the wall's extraordinary capacity to simply stand in a doorway and be immovable. Each mission is a wall, and each wall you learn to read before you touch it. Your ability to read people reaches a level that starts to frighten even you. You begin to see the violence before it happens, not through supernatural instinct, but through the accumulated library of 10,000 micro-expressions, the grammar of human fear and aggression parsed through years of hyper-vigilant observation. You can walk into a room and know within 90 seconds who in it would pull a trigger if the situation shifted. You can sit across from a man and tell whether he's planning to betray you before he's consciously decided to. It makes you nearly untouchable. It also makes you profoundly, permanently alone. Because when you can read everyone, you can trust no one. You see behind every performance, every warmth, every gesture of friendship, and you know how much of it is calculation. You watch the architect with your new eyes and you see the mechanisms. The way he engineers loyalty through controlled suffering. The way he creates debt. The way affection in this world is always a hook with a price. The only people you can't fully read are your crew. Not because they're opaque, because you're too close. They're the only people you've ever stopped analyzing and simply existed beside. One night, cleaning equipment in the safe house, Stitch puts down what he's doing and looks at the ceiling for a long time. Then he says he found something. He says he's been moving small amounts for months. A reserve, a quiet accumulation. He has a contact in another country, someone he grew up with who got out clean. There's a garage, a legitimate one, engine repair, custom work, that needs a partner with fast hands and mechanical instinct. He could be there in 3 weeks if he moved right. He turns to look at you and asks, "What do you want, Canvas?" You feel something cold and automatic close around your chest. You tell him to stop talking. You tell him that the walls in this building are not decorative. You tell him that wanting things outside this life is the most efficient way to destroy everyone who matters to you. He looks at you the way the old woman looked at your first mural on that factory wall. Not angry, disappointed, like he sees something in you that you've buried too deep to reach yourself. He doesn't bring it up again. 3 days later, you're called to the architect. He's standing at the window. Doesn't turn around when you enter. Tells you in a quiet, flat voice that Stitch was observed making contact with an external party. That he moved assets that don't belong to him. That the organization's response to this kind of breach is non-negotiable. He turns then, looks at you. He says that your crew brought him in. Your crew's record is the reason this ends cleanly instead of publicly. And your loyalty will be measured by what you do in the next 24 hours. Find Stitch. Execute the breach protocol, or all 4 of you answer for it together. You don't speak. You leave. In the elevator, you stand very still and feel the machine logic of it assembling itself in your chest. The cold calculus of survival versus everything else. You know exactly where Stitch will be. Not because of your reading ability. Because you know him. Because you are him. In every way that matters. He will go to the place that meant the most before all of this. You find him in the basement of a condemned apartment building 3 miles from the facility. The place where, in the early days of your training, he showed you a hidden room he'd found. The walls still covered in faded graffiti from someone who'd been there years before you. He used to come here when the weight got too heavy. He said the colors helped. When you push open the door, He's sitting on the floor with his back against the wall, facing the murals. His bag is packed beside him. He doesn't flinch when he hears you. He just says, "I knew it would be you." You stand in the doorway. The painted walls glow faintly in the light from his phone. Faces and shapes and colors bleeding together, someone's whole inner world preserved on concrete. You look at them and feel something in your chest tear quietly. Stitch says he's not angry, says he always knew the math. That if this moment was coming, he'd rather it be someone who actually knew him than a stranger who'd make it ugly. He reaches into his jacket. You tense, but he pulls out a folded piece of paper, holds it out toward you. He says he drew something for the garage, a logo. He was going to put it above the door. You don't take it. If you take it, you will not be able to do what you came here to do. Stitch nods like he understands. He folds it back up and puts it in his breast pocket over his heart. He says, "You were the best reader of people I ever met, Canvas. But you never read yourself." He closes his eyes. Your hand doesn't shake. It never shakes anymore. That used to feel like strength. Right now, it feels like the worst thing about you. The sound of the shot bounces off the painted walls. The colors don't change. The faces on the concrete keep looking at you with their faded, patient expressions. You stand there for a long time after. When you finally leave, you realize that the part of yourself that you'd been protecting all this time, the part that felt things, that noticed beauty, that stood in front of walls and translated what they meant, is gone. You executed it yourself, in a room full of someone else's art. You go back to the safe house. You sit in the dark. Cypher is already awake. She doesn't ask. She already calculated the probability of this outcome 3 days ago and has been sitting with the knowledge ever since. She puts a cup of water in front of you and sits across the table and says nothing. Because there is nothing to say. The wall doesn't come out of his room at all. That night, for the first time, you can't read any of their faces. 3 weeks pass. You run 4 missions, each one cleaner than the last. The architect begins using you and your reduced crew for the highest value contracts, the ones that require not just physical capability, but the ability to walk into a room and dismantle the human architecture from the inside before anyone realizes the structure is compromised. You become very good at destroying things that look solid. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, you're walking through the financial district on a route survey for an upcoming contract when you turn a corner and stop completely. Someone has done a mural on the side of a parking structure. It's new. The paint still has that faint chemical shimmer. It's enormous, and it's extraordinary. A figure standing at the edge of something, arms out, face turned up, not falling, not flying, just existing in that suspended moment between the two. The colors are violent and tender at the same time. Blues that hurt, reds that heal. You stand in front of it for 20 minutes. A man stops beside you, looks at it, then looks at you and asks if you know who did it. You shake your head. He shakes his, says it showed up overnight, says the city will probably paint over it by next week. You think, not if I have anything to say about it. That night, something unlocks. You find yourself at an art supply store, moving through the aisles with a strange, hollow hunger. The cans are lined up in their color families, clean and sealed. Your hands reach for them before your mind decides to. Crimson, cobalt, raw umber, chrome yellow. You carry them to the counter and put them down without speaking. The cashier rings them up without looking at you. You take the bag. You find a wall. And the moment the first cap breaks and the color blooms against the concrete, something in your chest cracks open. Warm and terrifying and absolutely catastrophically familiar. You paint for 6 hours without stopping. You don't plan it. It comes out of somewhere you didn't know was still alive. A figure in chains that are flowering. A city seen from the inside of its own ruin. wings made of spray paint lines and broken geometry. When you step back, your hands are shaking, not from cold, from recognition. You stand in front of what you made and feel something you haven't felt in years. Not the absence of fear, not the cold precision of a completed objective. You feel seen by yourself. That's when the memory breaks. It doesn't come back gently. It comes like a wall collapsing. The apartment, the photo above the mattress, the factory wall, the old woman's eyes, the rail yard, the unfinished mural, the city caught between burning and blooming. Your name, your real name, surfaces from somewhere deep in the dark water of your brain and hits the surface, and you go down to your knees on the pavement, spray can still in your hand, and you press your forehead to the cold ground and you shake. You remember who you were before all of this. You remember that you were not built for this. The next day, the architect calls you in for the new contract. It's unusual. Not a person, not directly. He slides a folder across the table. Inside, a target profile, a location, a method. The target is a collector, an art dealer who moves more than paintings. He brokers information alongside the canvases, using the art world as cover for intelligence trafficking. He's been selling data on the architect's network to a competitor. The contract is termination plus retrieval of a specific hard drive that the target keeps in a private gallery attached to his estate. The gallery, the architect adds with something approaching humor, is apparently full of street art. The collector has a weakness for it. You take the folder. You leave. You spend 2 days preparing. But not for the contract. You prepare for the exit. You spend those 2 days moving quietly, reading the people around you with everything you have. You read the architect's core lieutenants, their schedules, their dependencies. You read the facility's internal communication patterns, the gaps in the surveillance rotation, the 12-minute window between the shift change on the eastern perimeter. You read the whole architecture of the organization the way you used to read walls, layer by layer, what's structural and what's decorative, where the real weight is held and where the surface is just paint over rot. Then you go to Cypher. You don't tell her everything. You tell her enough. You show her the window. You tell her when and where. You tell her to bring the wall. She looks at you for a long time. Then she says, "What about you?" You tell her you have something to finish first. She doesn't argue. She's already running the calculation. She knows what it means. She reaches across the table and covers your hand with hers for exactly 3 seconds. Then she withdraws, straightens, and tells you the exit vectors for the eastern perimeter. You memorize them. Then you go to the gallery. You go alone. Not because the mission requires it, because what happens in that gallery isn't a mission. It's a confession. You move through the collector's security with the ease of someone who helped design its equivalent. The gallery is at the back of the estate, a private space, white walls, climate-controlled. And the architect was right. It's full of street art, canvases, prints, photographs of walls that no longer exist. You walk through it slowly, reading each piece, feeling the specific texture of other people's hunger, other people's need to translate the world into color and line and meaning. You find the hard drive. You stand there for a moment with it in your hand. Then you put it back. You pick up a can of paint you brought with you. The color is the same crimson you used on your very first piece. The wings on the factory wall, what feels like 1,000 years and 1 lifetime ago. You turn to the largest blank wall in the gallery and you paint. You paint everything. The orphan apartment, the magazine photo, the factory wall, the old woman's eyes, the rail yard at night, the city suspended between fire and flowers, the warehouse, the architect's face, the cell, Stitch and Cypher and the wall, 4 silhouettes pressed together in darkness, palms out, blood mixing. The missions, not as actions, but as weights. Each one a stone you added to something you'd been carrying. Stitch in the basement, walls covered in someone else's art, eyes closed. The art supply store. The parking structure mural. Your own face, reflected in a spray can, looking like someone who is finally, irrevocably done. You work for 2 hours. When you finish, you step back. The wall is the truest thing you've ever made. Your phone vibrates multiple times. You know what that means. They're coming. You walk to the gallery's side exit, a service door that opens onto a maintenance road. You push through into the night air, and there they are. 3 vehicles, headlights cutting through the dark, moving fast. They know you deviated from the contract. They know you're burning your exit. You run, not away, toward the edge of the estate, which backs up against a ridge. You know this geography. You mapped it 2 days ago. Below the ridge, the city, alive and glittering and completely indifferent, 100,000 walls waiting to be translated. The vehicles screech behind you. Doors open! Boots on gravel. You reach the ridge. Below you, the city breathes. Lights and shadows and the geometry of human life stacked 40 stories high. Somewhere down there, Cypher and the Wall are already through the eastern perimeter and moving. Behind you, someone calls your designation. Not canvas, your asset number. The number they gave you when they decided you were a tool. You look back once, you read their faces, and what you see is not anger. What you see is fear. The fear of men who have just realized that the most dangerous thing in the organization was never its weapons or its network or its money. It was the one person inside it who could see all of it clearly, and who just decided to stop pretending not to. You turn back to the city. Someone behind you is shouting coordinates into a radio. You hear the word elimination. You hear the word loose end. You hear the specific, efficient vocabulary of an organization that has already begun the paperwork on your death. You close your eyes for 1 second. You feel the night air. You smell the paint still on your hands, crimson and cobalt and chrome yellow, the colors of every wall you ever tried to make mean something. You think about the mural in the gallery, the one they'll find when they breach the building, the one that tells the whole story, start to finish, in the only language you ever actually spoke. You think, at least it exists. At least it's on a wall somewhere. At least someone will stand in front of it someday and feel something they can't name. You think, that's enough. The first shot cracks the night behind you. You're already moving, not running, not hiding, just moving. Forward and downward into the light of the city, into the breathing dark of 1,000 blank walls waiting to become something. The shots fade. The city receives you, and canvas disappears into it. Not as a killer, not as an asset, not as a ghost without a name, but as what he always was, someone with something to say, and every wall in the world left to say it on.